It's a Tuesday morning in 1957, maybe 10 o'clock, and your mother is in the kitchen doing the dishes with the radio on when the doorbell rings. She doesn't check the window and she doesn't hesitate. She dries her hands on her apron, walks to the front door, and opens it wide to find a man standing on the porch in a suit and tie with a fedora on his head and polished shoes, holding a briefcase in one hand and two mops tucked under his arm. The moment the door opens, he takes 2 steps backward to give her space, because that's how he was trained. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm your Fuller brush man, and I have a free gift for you." He holds out a small brush, palm-sized, nothing more than a twist of wire with a tuft of bristles that's good for scrubbing vegetables or cleaning around the sink or 100 other things around the house, and it's completely free with no obligation at all. While your mother is still looking at it, he's already reaching down to kick off his overshoes, which he bought a size too large on purpose so they slip off without having to bend down, and he's saying something like, "I'll just step in for a moment," in a voice that makes it sound like the most normal thing in the world. Before she's fully decided whether she wants company, he's already in the living room with the case open on the sofa and brushes appearing from everywhere. Your mother bought something that day, and she almost always did, because 2 out of 3 women bought something once that case was open on their sofa. If you were a kid in that house, you remember the click of that briefcase and the rows of brushes lined up like instruments. You remember the way he talked to your mother like he'd known her for years, because he had. He was always the same man walking the same route through the same families, coming back every 3 to 6 months. He knew your name and which products your family was running low on, and he knew about the new baby and the new kitten and the leaky faucet your father still hadn't gotten around to fixing. This is how it started and why all of it disappeared. Drop a comment and tell us, did the Fuller brush man come to your house, and what did your mother buy? We want to hear it. The Fuller Brush Company was started by a farm boy from Nova Scotia who couldn't hold down a job to save his life. Alfred Carl Fuller was born on January 13, 1885, the 11th of 12 children on a farm in the Annapolis Valley, with nothing more than a grammar school education to his name. His father looked at his hands once and told him, "These are your fortune, boy, and be suspicious of anyone who shows you how to make a living without using them." In 1903, at age 18, Alfred moved to Somerville, Massachusetts, where he got himself hired and fired 3 times in a row: trolley conductor, gardener, groom, before his brother Dwight got him a job at a small brush company selling door-to-door. And as it turned out, the only thing Alfred was actually any good at was knocking on strangers' doors and refusing to leave until they'd bought something. On New Year's Day, 1906, he set up a workbench in his sister Annie's basement with a hand-operated wire twisting machine, spools of wire, horsehair, hog bristles, and natural fiber, all purchased for $375. He spent his nights twisting brushes by hand and his days selling them on the street, and by the end of that first week, he'd turned a profit of $42.15. Within a year, he had 32 different types of brushes in his catalog and had moved to Hartford, Connecticut, where a $10 classified ad in Everybody's magazine that asked, "Why not get out of the rut you are in?" brought in 260 new salesmen within a single month. By the 1920s, the Fuller brush man had become a fixture in neighborhoods across the country. By the 1930s, he was a national institution. By 1948, his salesmen were collectively knocking on 50 million doors a year in a country that had fewer than 43 million households. Here is what the visit actually looked like from the inside. because most people remember the feeling of it, but not the system that made it work. Every salesman was given an exclusive territory of between 2,000 and 6,000 families, and that territory belonged to him permanently. Nobody else from the company worked those streets, which meant the families on his route got to know one man year after year. His daily target was 60 doorbells. He walked an average of 6 miles to reach them, selling to roughly 1 in 5 homes he approached. But once he actually made it through the front door and got that case open, 2 out of 3 women ended up buying something, with the average order running between $3 and $7. The case held about 25 to 30 sample brushes. The important thing is that they were only samples. He never left any merchandise behind, just a free brush and a handwritten order form. He would come back the following Saturday to deliver everything and collect the cash. That timing was deliberate because Saturday was when the husband's paycheck was still largely sitting in the bank. And here is a detail that tells you everything about how skilled these men were. If a woman tried to cancel on delivery day, which usually happened because her husband had come home and objected, the salesman would never argue. Instead, he would look down at the order list and ask, "Which one did you decide you could get along without?" That is a very different question from, "Do you want to cancel?" because it assumed she was keeping most of the order, and more often than not, that is exactly what happened. The product line started with brushes and kept growing until it was enormous. It included floor scrubbers, radiator brushes, bottle brushes, lint brushes, hair brushes, a brush for cleaning spittoons, another one for silk hats, and dozens more for tasks you would not think required their own brush until someone demonstrated one on your living room carpet. By the 1960s, the catalog had swelled to 340 items, including mops, brooms, polishes, shampoo, cologne, and even vitamins. And at one point, the company was manufacturing 70% of all the toothbrushes sold in America. But the brushes themselves were what people remembered most because they were made of horsehair and hog bristles twisted into wire with solid hardwood handles, built to survive decades of daily use. There are people alive today still using a Fuller brush comb they bought in the 1950s, and one woman wrote that she had owned exactly 2 combs from the Fuller brush man in her entire 77 years. What set the Fuller brush man apart from every other door-to-door salesman was the training and the code that stood behind him. Every dealer signed the Fuller pledge. I will be courteous, I will be kind, I will be sincere, I will be helpful. It sounds like a greeting card, but it meant everything in practice because these men were independent contractors working on nothing but commission. They paid for their own sample kits and their own gas. If they did not sell anything on a given day, then they simply did not eat that night. Commission ran anywhere from 30 to 50% of the retail price depending on the decade, and a good branch manager in the 1930s could average $10,000 a year, which works out to roughly $215,000 in today's money. But the turnover was absolutely brutal because 7 out of every 10 new recruits washed out within 3 months. Fortune magazine reported in 1938 that out of 4,350 active dealers, nearly 2/3 had been there less than 6 months, and only 192 had lasted 5 years. Just to keep about 4,500 men in the field, the company had to recruit 12,000 new ones every single year. The ones who survived became permanent fixtures in their communities. John Stano sold Fuller brushes in Westport, Connecticut for the better part of 70 years, starting in 1938 and continuing all the way through 2005, and his doorbell greeting was just 2 words, "Full man," because that was all anyone in town needed to hear. Over those decades, he sold to Eva Gabor, Gene Tierney, and Elizabeth Taylor, and he received the only 50-year service award in the entire history of the company. Whenever a door was slammed in his face, he would turn to his daughter and say, "Great, now the odds are in our favor." The Fuller Brush Man became so deeply woven into American culture that Hollywood made 2 movies about him. In 1948, Red Skelton starred in The Fuller Brush Man, a Columbia comedy about a bumbling salesman who stumbles into a murder mystery. And 2 years later, Lucille Ball starred in The Fuller Brush Girl, a film widely cited as the one that first showcased Lucy's physical comedy, the performance that led directly to I Love Lucy in 1951. But the moment that mattered most came 15 years earlier, when Disney's Three Little Pigs won the Academy Award in 1933, with a scene where the big bad wolf shows up disguised as a Fuller Brush Man, knocks on the door, offers his brush as a gift, and then lunges for the pig, only to be beaten senseless with his own brush. That 8-minute cartoon played in every movie theater in the country and permanently cemented the Fuller Brush Man as a figure every American recognized. Billy Graham sold Fuller brushes in the summer of 1936 at 17 years old, going door to door through the small towns of South Carolina and finishing the summer as the top salesman in both Carolinas. He later said that selling those brushes had taught him the most important lesson of his life. Sincerity is the biggest part of selling anything, including the Christian plan of salvation. And then there is the company legend about the salesman who talked his way past the Secret Service at Hyde Park and walked out having sold President Roosevelt $13 worth of matched brushes. At its absolute peak in 1960, the Fuller Brush Company was doing $109 million a year. 9 out of 10 American households had been visited by a Fuller Brush Man. The company had up to 35,000 salespeople on the streets, and the Hartford factory was turning out more than 23 million products every year. And then, the ground shifted underneath all of it. The most devastating blow was demographic. Women started working outside the home in numbers that changed everything, from 37% in 1960 to over 50% by the early 1970s, which meant the Fuller Brush Man's entire model, built around someone being home to answer the door in the middle of the day, was collapsing from the inside out. A salesman could ring 60 doorbells in a single afternoon and find nothing but locked doors at 40 of them. The second blow was legal, as thousands of towns across the country adopted Green River ordinances, named after a 1931 law in Green River, Wyoming, that banned door-to-door solicitation entirely unless the homeowner had given prior consent. The third was competitive. Avon figured out the future first by hiring part-time women and backing them with national advertising, and between 1953 and 1967, Avon's sales grew 900%, while Fuller's barely managed 47. Alfred's son, Avard, who was running the company by then, admitted it plainly. "We goofed. The handwriting was on the wall and we should have read it." Fuller did not get around to hiring women until 1966, and by then, it was at least a decade too late. Alfred Fuller himself died on December 4, 1973, at 88 years old, and by then his family had already sold the company 5 years earlier. Through the 1980s, the company tried mail-order catalogs, retail stores, and eventually even multi-level marketing, which destroyed what was left of the traditional sales force almost overnight. Revenue fell from $160 million in 1989 to just $24 million by 1994. On February 21, 2012, the Fuller Brush Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, with 180 employees remaining. Today, the brand still technically exists. A company called Galaxy Brush in New Jersey owns the name and sells products through a website with about 24 employees. There are no salesmen walking the streets anymore, nobody ringing doorbells with a case full of brushes and a free gift in their pocket. The original Hartford factory is being converted into apartments under the name Bristle and Main, but the Fuller brush name is still inlaid in the entrance floor, right where it has been for over 100 years. In September of 1967, a 7-year-old boy named Bob Peirce was homesick with pneumonia, and his family had just bought a brand new tape recorder that he had been playing with all morning. His mother looked out the window and saw the Fuller brush man walking up the front path, and she told Bobby to leave the machine running. That recording captured the entire visit from the moment the door opened, the salesman greeting Bobby by name, doing a little magic trick with a comb, telling him he smelled like $1 million because of the bubble bath he had sold the family on his last visit, asking about the new kitten, and then smoothly sliding into his pitch about a stainless steel sponge and a watch on a chain, all of it flowing together like a conversation between old friends rather than a sales call. That recording survived for decades, and when people finally heard it, they realized it had captured something that no photograph or newspaper article ever could. The sound of a man who knew your name and knew your family, who showed up every few months as reliably as the seasons, kicked off his overshoes at your front door, settled into your sofa, and opened his case as though he had been doing it in your living room his entire life. When that kind of thing stopped happening, nothing in the world ever came along to replace it. If the Fuller brush man used to come to your house, if you remember hiding behind the couch while your mother looked through that open case, or the little free vegetable brush that lived by the kitchen sink for the next 30 years, or the sound of that familiar knock every few months, leave a comment and tell us about it. Tell us his name if you remember it, and what your mother always bought, because those details matter to us, and we read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every video on this channel, we look at another piece of American life that quietly disappeared when nobody was paying attention, and we try to understand not just what it was, but why it left.